Okay, so we'll get started. I know everyone probably has a lot to do, being that it's a holiday tomorrow. So we wanted to welcome you to another CTC software webinar. I'm Keely Dickerson, AEC Account Manager at SolidCAD. And with me today is Peter Van Stee, our AEC Technical Specialist. So today we're going to cover the BIM Batch Suite. I want you to feel free to ask questions throughout through the chat. I'll relay them to Peter, but we will have a Q&A at the end as well. The webinar is being recorded, so if any of your fellow team members were not able to attend, they'll be able to follow up with that a little bit later. So BIM Batch Suite is a small tool set, but it has a lot of power to really help you, the end user, and the BIM manager process those key workflows rapidly and en masse. So today, Peter's going to be focusing on processing project information, that flow of information in and out. So let's get started. Thank you, Peter.
All right, awesome. So I'm just going to jump in and share my screen. There we go. Share that, and I'm going to bring up Revit. So right now I have Revit 2020 open with a particular project, but with being CTC, we actually have versions available for not just this one version, but actually all supported versions of Revit as well. So we don't have to worry about, hey, are we looking at anything specific? We actually support any. It will support any supported version of Revit. So that's 2022 all the way back down to, I believe 2017 was even supported as well. So we'll keep up support for all of those. All right, so today we're going to be focusing mostly on this BIM Batch Suite. Okay, so the BIM Batch Suite includes a bunch of different tools, including some free tools. So if you were to just choose to install this this tool and maybe just try to see what it's like, you'll have the free tools available to you forever. There's never going to be any, these are never going to be taken away for any reason. So we're going to be talking about these two tools and how they work together. So the family exporter, so to be able to take a very select section of the families out from your project and put them in a particular folder within, let's say, whatever you want to put that. And the other one is actually the family loader. So if I had a bunch of other families and stuff that I want to bring into a project, so one workflow for this might be, hey, I have a ton of families in my project that I want to kind of save on my server. And now I have a brand new project. Maybe I want to just take a bunch of those families and simply load them all in without having to open, load into project, close, and do the next one. It's a much more streamlined process. And since these are free tools, you'll always have access to those. So there are a couple other things I want to talk about today. One of them is actually going to be the plotter and exporter. So one of the more common things we need to do is actually just to print a progress set. Let's say I have a weekly progress set and I want to print that on a regular basis. So I can very easily say, hey, I want to specify exactly which sheets and which views I want to print. Maybe I want to export as a CAD file. Maybe I want to export into Navisworks and see, just kind of do a whole bunch of different things with those. So plotter and exporter is going to allow us to not only do that, but do that in a streamlined fashion, being able to catch all of our extra files that we may have added since the last time we did this. It'll be able to, do a lot of different file types, and it will be able to do that. We'll be able to set that up and schedule it so that those files will always, on a weekly basis, those files will print. And we can just set it up and forget it, and it will constantly just deliver you your new package set. The other one we're going to be talking about today is the project processor. This tool here allows us to do a lot with with the projects that we're working with. So if let's say, for example, my project is running slow, there's a lot of different things that could cause a project to run slowly. Having a lot of extra views, having a lot of imports, a lot of different file types, having those exploded CAD files within our projects. Don't do that. So we can actually use this project processor to clean out a lot of this basic stuff based on a number of set rules that we have built in. And we're going to get into what those rules are and that kind of how they work. So that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today. But there is one more tool that I'd like to chat about, and that's actually under our CTC BIM Manager Suite, and that would be the Rev Cloud Remover. So let's just jump into this one first and see how that actually works. So if I were to jump, and again, this is one of our free tools. So the CTC BIM Manager Suite comes with a lot of the free tools as well as a few paid tools. But in this case, we're using the free tool Rev Cloud Remover. And if I were to just open that up, you can see that I have a list of all of the different revisions built into my project. So I have revision 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now I have a set number of revision clouds on those associated with those revisions. But maybe I'm archiving a drawing, I want to get rid of all those revision clouds. Maybe I just don't want to just hide them like you do normally through the revision manager. But in this case, I just want to straight up remove them, clean them out. I could simply come in and say, oh, okay, so revision 4, it has 1 revision cloud, and I want to remove those. Or I want to say also 2, or I can just go over here and say, I want to grab all of those different revision clouds. And now I can just say, remove those. And all those revision clouds are just gone. So as an archiving process, this is actually a really cool tool because there's no other way to en masse get rid of all of those revision clouds. So that may be something that we, in a very simple process, very easy way to just kind of get something done that might otherwise take a very long time. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to come back and stop that guy back up here. So what I want to talk about right now is to say, well, I have a ton of sheets in my project. I have a ton of sheets, and I kind of want to print them all out. But you know what? If I were to print these sheets as is right now, I just want to say go into File, Print, and just go into that setting. If I say I want to select all of these sheets, they're going to, and as one big PDF, they're going to come in the order that I see here. So I see, A100, okay, that's good. A200, so far so good. 300, 400, 500. And then I get into the ADs. Well, these are demolition sheets. Maybe those should go earlier on. Then I have AEs, and I have, oh, here's my title sheet. Why was it doing way down the list? That should be the first sheet I see. So I want a way that I can actually organize my sheets as well. I want a way that I can specifically navigate and say, I want this sheet, and I want to bring this, to print it out a very specific way, and I want to put it in my list in a very particular order. So to do that, we're actually going to use the plotter and exporter from the BIM Batch Suite. Okay, so we're going to bring this guy up. I'm just going to take a look and just find all of the views and sheets and everything within my actual project. Okay, so we're going to take a quick second to do that. And when we do that, we're going to notice that we have a list of all of our views and a list of all of our sheets, legends, and sheet sets, all listed down here. So, for example, if I wanted to just find an individual sheet or grab something very specific and bring it over to the right side, actually, I'm going to actually remove a couple things. So, just to say, okay, I can bring a bunch of these over to the right side. So I could, in fact, take all of these sheets and say, you know what, I want to add selected to, I want PDFs of these, and I want DWGs of these. Or I can say, you know what, I also want an IFC export because we're working with other people that are not maybe using Revit specifically, but I can actually, depending on what I want to actually pick, I can just add all those sheets. And now once they're in here, I can in fact, well, okay, there was that G000. I can move that right to the very top. So in that case, it becomes the first thing that gets printed. And I can actually work with all of that. But as what happens when I'm actually working with a drawing site, working with a project, well, I add sheets and I make some changes and I move things around. And you know what? This list might get out of date. So maybe this list is not exactly what I want to. Maybe this list is not exactly what I want to work with, because over time it's just I need to then keep up and constantly change this to make it what I need it to be. So maybe that wasn't the perfect solution. It's a perfect solution for if I want to print stuff right now, great, get it done, let's go. But if I want to use that same set of sheets over and over and over, then we kind of have to take a look at something a little bit different. And if we take a look over here, I have available views and sheets, but I also have this thing right over here called a Wildcard Search library. Okay. So in my case, I could say, I want to take a look at, I want to make a brand new thing over here. I want to make, something brand new where I can bring in a bunch of sheets. So I want to add a brand new one. So it's using the add button at the very bottom here. And I can say, well, because I'm doing a wildcard search, I just want to grab everything. And that wildcard search, as is the same with Windows Explorer and a whole bunch of other business software, I'm just going to use the asterisk. Okay, so the asterisk is our wildcard search. So I can use that to look for anything. So in my case, I'm going to grab everything, and then I'm going to filter it down based on some other rules in a bit. So I could do this based on, I'm looking for sheets only or looking for views. So depending on which one I want to actually utilize, I can, which one I actually want to print, I can do a wildcard search for either. All right. So I could potentially include sheets only if they contain a very specific revision. So hey, I get a brand new set of I've applied revisions to a whole new set of sheets, and I only want to print those sheets. Well, okay, let's see. I only want to print sheets that have revision 4 on them. So if it doesn't have revision 4, I don't really want to print it. Or I could say, only contains the highest revision defined. So in that case, I have, let's say I have revision 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, 4 is the latest. It's only going to print that one. Okay. Or the highest revision issued. So depending on what I set up in my revision list, that's what's going to actually show up here. Okay, but that is actually how to filter things out based on revisions, but that's not always what we need to look for. So instead, I'm going to filter by, so I want all of my sheets, but I'm going to filter based on something very specific. In fact, I'm actually going to filter based on disciplines, sheet discipline. Now this is, I believe this is actually a custom parameter. So I'm going to say, so the filtering rules here work very much the same as they do within Revit itself. If I'm trying to filter a schedule. So if I go in here and I say, I want to, if my sheet discipline equals, and it just gives me a list right here. So if it equals general, I want that to show up in my list. And if I say, just let's see what happens when I test this. Okay, I get this sheet. This is the sheet that that actually gets pulled out as part of that list. And that's exactly what I want to see. I'm going to say okay. I'm actually going to edit this so that description is going to be general sheets only. I'm just going to say okay. And now I'm going to, whoops, that's an edit again. I want to just bring this over. Let's see here. I want to actually bring this sheet over. I want to add it as part of my PDF. So it's actually going to give me, it's actually going to say, depending on what this wildcard is actually going to generate, I can actually bring this in. And if I add, let's say, a second general sheet, well, because I said filtered based on general, it's now going to add it to this list. Okay, so whenever I add new sheets, it automatically adds it to this list. So now maybe the next set of sheets I want to add is actually going to be a demolition set. So I'm going to say, well, again, do a wildcard search. In this case, I want to do arch demo. So sheets. Arch demo sheets. So again, I'm doing this by sheets. I'm going to do, let's say, where was it? Sheet phase. And I believe this is still a sheet phase or sheet, what was it? Sheet discipline. I want these to be equal to architecture. But I also want to set up, because I have several different types of architectural sheets, I also want, in this case, my sheet phase, and I believe a bunch of these are in fact custom parameters. There is no phase for demo, but in this case, this sheet has that as a custom parameter, which we can easily work with, and so we can test all of this specifically. So once I test this, I can see, hey, I'll have all of my AD sheets. Now, technically, I could say, hey, let's load in all of my, if the sheet number begins with AD, then it brings it in. But I also have, but you kind of need to think a little bit about those rules specifically, because I have other sheets that start with A. So on my project browser on the left here, I can see that I have A401. So if I had a wildcard search for those, it would, if it begins with A, well, these AD sheets also begins with an A. So it will also bring it into that list. So we kind of need a way to kind of work with that and see how's that actually going to work. All right. So in this case, I have a bunch of my demolition sheets, and I can say, okay, because this is exactly what I want to see. And now I can actually drop this in and add it to my PDF list as well. So now it starts with my general sheet, then I print my demo sheets, and then so on and so forth. I can actually build this up. And once I've built up a whole thing, I can just say, you know what? Why am I doing this every single time? Why don't I just save my settings? I can save the settings and how all of these sheets are actually put together. Or in my case, I'm just going to open an existing one. So I'm going to go back and where was I? So in this case, I've actually brought in a bunch of different. In this case, I've actually brought in a bunch of different things for PDFs, DWGs, and you know what? I can add Navisworks files as well. Or I can say, I want IFCs or FBXs or any other export type that we can think of is in here. When we're working with, dates, because all of our, we're working with, okay, I've said I want to print as a PDF. I said I want to print as a DWG or export those. Well, what settings are we using for those exports? And all of that actually has to do with these options over here on the right side. So in my case, if I want a PDF setting, PDF plotting, I'm going to click on this section for settings over here. And I can say, well, all right, I want this particular PDF writer. I want these print settings over here. So this is going to be whatever saved settings we have within our actual print dialog. We can utilize these. And we can actually build up a naming convention for our sheet. So I could create all of my PDFs as separate files using this. So in my case, it'll start with a project number, then a project name, and then a processing date to say when this was actually printed. And maybe I want the separator between all of these to be an underscore. So right at the very bottom here, I have it set as an underscore. And here is actually a sample of what that is actually going to look like. Okay. And as far as the date goes in here, this is right now set up as year, month, day. To the side, if I actually go back, we can see that the date format is specified right up here. So if we need it to be, day, month, year, or month, day, year, or whatever, we can set that up right up here and build it up however you see fit. The separator between all of these, I can just go in and choose, maybe I don't want any separator, underscore, hyphen, space, or space, hyphen, space. So space dash space in there, and I can utilize that for my naming convention. Or that's just for creating separate files. If I combine all of my files into a single thing, I can again still build up all of that naming convention. But I could start with something like, maybe the file name. Maybe I want the processing date on the very end. Maybe I want the project number. I can just put that at the very beginning, followed by the project name. And again, maybe I want a different separator. So now this is what that entire project is going to look like. So maybe I do want a file name in there. Maybe I don't. I can remove that. It kind of cleans up my file name. So if everything is put together in here, very easy to kind of take some objects, bring it over, reorganize it, see what kind of separator we want, and add in, and just kind of see a sample of what that's going to look like. All right. So very easy to kind of set up what our drawings are actually going to look like. It's very similar with, let's say, DWGs. How are we actually going to export all of these? So we can actually use custom settings, or if there's a specific standard that you want to use, if your office has a very particular standard, we can definitely utilize those. And if we're exporting CAD files, well, we all know that the CAD files come with the DWG, but they also come with that little PCP file. Now, it's an antiquated version of the plot line thickness files, but there's no real way to say turn that off as a default setting within Revit. So, but our CTC tools here does have the delete PCP file option here. So we can actually remove those automatically. And then, yeah, everything at the bottom here is pretty much the same. So we can build up how all of these are actually going to look. So views and sheets can be done differently. All right. So once we have all of our wildcard searches built up, we know exactly how all of the settings for these objects, how they're actually going to be, how they're going to be printed, how they're going to be exported. Now we can, at this point, we can just say, run this now, and just plot and export everything right now. Or we can go one step further and say, well, you know what? I want to print all of my stuff at a very particular time, like on a weekly basis. Every Sunday at 2 a.m., I want to print all of my drawings. Okay. Then I would use the scheduler option. Now, the main thing we need to, so there's a bunch of important things that come up in this little text box, but the main thing we need to be aware of is that, well, first off, you don't need to have Revit open in order for this to work, but you do need to be logged into your computer. If you're not logged in, this function is not going to work. All right. So that's actually what it says in this very first setting right up here. Okay. So I bring up this, scheduler. But if I say I want to create a brand new time, essentially, and I want to do that, I want to print a progress set on a weekly basis. So I'm going to go over here and say every 1 week, I want to print at a Sunday, and I want to print, you know what? I'm going to print at 2 a.m. Yeah, so 2 a.m. Is when I want to print every Sunday. I could synchronize this across time zones if I wanted to, depending on if we have offices in multiple different places. Okay. Okay, so once all of this is done, I can give this a particular name. Let's say test settings. And if I wanted to stop this at a particular date, I can. So in this case, well, you know what? Let's set it up to not stop. I'm going to validate my settings here. Whoops. I'm just going to say OK to this. So now this setting has actually been set up so that I'm just going to edit this. I needed to save my, oops, that wasn't what it was. So all of these, so right now at 2 a.m. every Sunday of every week, starting at this date, it will run the, it will actually run the print and export settings. Okay, so now I can just say, I can finish this and carry on with it. So I believe there's a quick question. Yes, there will be a recording, and you can get a copy of this. Yes. Okay, so that is what this this bit of the scheduler will do. So now this is actually running the tiny thing in the background that just says, hey, once it hits this time, I'm going to run this particular process. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. So that was our plotter and exporter setting. But we also have a couple other ones. For example, our project processor. So the project processor specifically has a bunch of different things that we can do that are absolutely extremely useful for any project. Now, I can use this to clean up a ton of different Revit projects all at the same time. So I can actually use this to run this on, my current open projects. So if I have all my projects that are currently open, I can just add those individual projects to my list, and I can run my processes on this one project. Or I can add, add a bunch of other projects as well, not just the open ones. Or I can add an entire folder of projects, and it will actually look through all of those and specify actually which one you want to use. And if you bring in a bunch, you can go in and turn on or off a bunch of these things. All right. But that is just choosing which sheets or which projects we're actually going to run this on. But what are we actually going to run? And that actually comes over to our processes tab. So our processes tab brings in a bunch of different things that we can do. So if I wanted to, let's start off with files here. Whoops, what did it do? I think it just, okay, here we go. Files. So under files over here, I could say if I have a file that does not have work, that is not work sharing enabled, I can come by and remove all of the backups. You'll notice that everything is going to be grayed out unless you have that option checked. So yes, I do want to do something with my files. I want to remove some backups. So this will, the files will need to be checked. If this is unchecked, if files is unchecked, it will not do anything in here, and therefore everything in here is going to be it's going to be grayed out, and it will not run. But if I wanted to, let's say, I want to clean up this my current project because I'm sending it to a consultant. It's theirs for being a background. I can use this to remove any backup files. I can open it with an audit as well as detach, and I can save that immediately. So I'm sending them a file with fewer errors, sending them that it's something that's been detached, so I no longer have to worry about them kind of like working through all those different errors, and it's saving that immediately. But after this processing is done, well, I've detached this file. What am I going to do with it? Well, I'm going to save it directly after all this processing. And I can actually say, well, I can save it in a new location. But with this, I can find and replace on the file name specifically. So if I wanted to remove detached from the end, maybe I wanted to add something, replace that and say for consultant use instead of detached. That is something we can utilize in here. This is just replacing something within the file name itself. Okay. I personally don't want to run the files on this particular section, but over here we have something like renaming. Now I can use this to say I want to rename a bunch of my different stuff within the entire project. So I could go through and rename a bunch of different views, templates, filters, or even sheets. Rename all of those to have something very particular. So in this case, I have this set up so that all of my views that are under any discipline that are floor plans, if they have no dependents, then I want to rename them. So I just want to rename the actual name of it. So I find anything in there, and I'm going to replace it with associated level, and with an abbreviation there. So that's kind of how this guy is built up, but I can actually replace it with pretty much anything I want. Whether it's a particular name that's already out there, I could do that. Or I could say, well, maybe I don't want just a name, but rather I want that to bring in any other file type that I want to actually append to this. So maybe I want to rename it with just the type. I can add that as well. Or maybe I want referencing detail. So I can add those to a list. And based on how all of those get put together. So I can say, let's start with the view name. And then I want the visual style on the very end of it. Let's start with, so right now it'll be view name, and then there's going to be no separator here, or if I want to add one, I can just put a space or something, space dash space. It will actually add that as a separator between them, depending on what I want to put in. And then we'll add in to the end of it, the visual style. So I actually replace the entire name of this individual view with however I put this together. So in this case, I have, if it has no dependence, then it's doing this. If it has dependence, it's going to do something else. And then, or if it is a dependent, then it's going to do something else entirely. So depending on how I want to actually put those together, it actually goes through and renames a bunch of those. And again, I can do that for my templates, filters, and sheets. I can just go through and add a bunch of different things if I want to, but I'm going to say rename all of my sheets. I want to find, let's see here, unnamed sheets, and replace it with, you know what, I'll replace it with details. Why not? So I can go through and replace a bunch of different things that way. And it's not just the name. You have to do number or both. Yeah. Next in the list, we actually have our swap. So if I turn on the swap, I can actually go through and say, oh, you know what? I have a bunch of dimension styles. And I'm looking specifically at a list of all of my dimension styles in this entire project. And there's one over here called 33. No idea what that's for. Maybe I've looked through the project, found it, and realized that, you know what, this is being used, but it's a copy of a different one, and you know it's kind of cluttering up our entire drawing. So maybe I want to replace this with something else. So I can go through and, you know what, I'm going to choose, I want to have the 3/32 aerial dimension style. So I can bring that in and use it to replace the existing dimension style in there. Okay. Now, these swaps, we can do a bunch of different things, and there is also another type swapper tool that we have in the CTC BIM Manager Suite that does very much the same thing, but this allows us to get a lot more granular with a lot more rules-based swapping. So if I say, hey, I have a text style, but my text style is set up as a default project text. It's actually the 3/32 Arial narrow. Well, I kind of want to replace it. I don't want the narrow anymore. I just want the 3/32 Arial. I want that to be my I want that to be my default project text, and I just want to replace all the narrow with the standard one. So in that case, I'm going to replace the 3/32 Arial default project text and replace it with 3/32 Arial. So that is actually going to make the 3/32 Arial my default type, and anything that was the narrow is now this new type. And I can go through and build that up with a bunch of different things in here as well. So I can replace line styles, I can replace line patterns. So if I go through and say, oh, you know what, someone's exploded a CAD file in here, we can look at that and actually say, hey, let's actually bring this in. We can actually say anything with like an import there, we can replace with a very particular other type. Very similar, it can find, you know, filled patterns, not the filled regions. This is very particular to the filled patterns themselves. So it will actually replace the filled patterns within a filled region if that's what we actually going to choose. So I can put in, you know, wildcard searches, and I can say, how is this actually going to work? So actually going back to these filled patterns, I could actually say, import followed by a wildcard search. So now it's going to grab all of the different imports because it starts with import and then a wildcard. So under that, every single one of these imports is actually going to be grabbed. And now I can say, oh, I want all of those replaced with an overhead line for whatever reason. So I can replace all of those lines very, very quickly. Or if I wanted to, if I had something like a hidden line, for example, I could replace those. So very easy to kind of grab everything and bring it in. I can do the same thing for materials and fill patterns as well. Right. So I can replace my aluminium and aluminum with my AL material. Right. So very easy to just swap from one type to another, clean up a lot of junk that ended up in my project. Very easy to do all of that. The next one down here is actually to clean all of our drawings. So you know what? I have a ton of sheets or a ton of views out there that are not being used at all. They are added to my project, but I don't have any use for them. They're just sitting there. Someone made them like 6 months ago, and they haven't cleaned up all those empty views. So these are empty 3D views that doesn't matter who's drawn by. So cleaning up my sheets. If it's a used sheet, it's on a sheet, and that's fine. If it's an empty, I want to get that cleaned. Doesn't matter who it's drawn by. It does not matter what the sheet number is. So none of that really matters. But I can say if it's empty, that means it's not on a sheet, and therefore I'm going to clean it out. So it's going to get deleted from my project. So very quick way to go through and just clean up our entire drawing. So very, very similar. We can go through and clean out any, if the sheet is empty, there's no views on it, it will get cleaned out. If it's a view and it has no dependence, it's going to get cleaned out. If it's a view and it is a dependent, it's going to get cleaned out, but only if those two are not on sheets. Okay, so if they're not on sheets, then they're going to get cleaned out at no other time. But I can, again, there's a whole bunch of different rules that we can build up in here using our wildcard, using whatever other parameters that we'd like. And using this, we can also clean out a bunch of templates. If they're not used, why are they here? Filters, links. So if I had linked in a project, deleted it, but not removed it from my list of LinkedIn projects, then why do we still have it here? Why is Revit doing all that extra work for no benefit? So let's just remove that, and this tool here is just going to find all of those links that are not being used and just remove them. Okay, it's also going to any imports that are brought in. Now, there's no way us natively within Revit to actually track any of our imports, those imported CAD files that we may have brought in. But this here will actually allow us to go through and say, well, any of those imports that are unused, or if they have been used, but if it's a very particular one that I want to remove, I can actually remove those and just say, let's clean this out. Okay. So in this case, I have these two are unused, and they're just going to get cleaned out. And again, I can do a lot of the same stuff, even with images or parameters. I could say, under a very particular category, if I had other parameters that I wanted to get cleaned out, I can easily do that. Line styles, fill patterns, line patterns, view types, all of those can actually get cleaned out. Now, since I went through and already, let's say back in my swap, I went through and replaced this 33 dimension style with the aerial, the 3/32 aerial. Well, now I can actually go through my clean, add a brand new one and say, oh, you know what? I want to clean out that 33 because it'll actually go through this list in order. It'll swap all the 33s with the new dimension style, and then it will come down to the clean and actually clean out all of the everything I added in this list. So in my case, I don't want that 33 in there anymore. Similarly, I can go to my text styles and say, you know what? This default 3/32 aerial narrow, I just want to remove that. I want to clean that out because I don't want to use it. And again, back in the swap section, I actually said I want to swap out the aerial narrow with the standard aerial. Okay, so it's actually going to go through and clean up all of those. And again, I can clean up any materials that are not being used if that's what we want to do. All right. Next up, we have Purge. Now, this Purge is a little bit different than the Purge all not used section that we have within Revit, but I can actually go through and clean out or purge out any unused families and symbols, any system families that are not being used, line styles, line patterns, materials that are not being used, other material assets, and fill patterns. So if I'm not using something, I can just go through here and it will recursively run through this list until there's nothing left to purge out. Whereas the standard purge, it'll just go through it once and it might leave a few things left behind. Because maybe I'm using a fill pattern within the material. And therefore the fill pattern is still being used. So it'll run through this, the standard will just run through, clean up the material, or clean out fill patterns, clean up the material, but then it will leave a fill pattern left over because that's left over from when we had the material. So this actually runs through recursively to actually go through multiple times until there's nothing left to actually clean out. The next one over here is actually parameters. This one is actually really, really powerful because it allows us to, let's say, clean out other parameters. So if I said, I have parameters built up for my door schedule, for example. And right now I have a panel finish that's built up as a material, but I want to, it's in the category of doors, I can actually say, I want to replace it with something very specific. I want to replace it with this, sorry, I want this brand new panel finish material, and I want the value source parameter is going to be my frame material. So it's going to, depending on what I choose in here, it's actually going to add the, it's going to go through and add the schedule column. So it's going to add this into a list for all of my, schedules. It's going to remove the existing one, replace the existing one, and replace the source parameter, even if I have this with combined parameters. Okay, and this so it will, the idea here is it will add in the new parameter in your schedule. It will replace or copy all the information from one column into the new parameter, so that we have all that information saved. And then potentially, depending on what we want to do here, it can actually remove that the old parameter as well. So going through this, I can actually very easily replace entire sections of out of a schedule, or replacing actual parameters without losing any data. I've not lost any information based on this. Okay. And then at the very bottom here, I also have links. So my links allow me to kind of go through, find individual links, find where their current path is, and maybe I want to replace that with not with, you know, the absolute path. Maybe I want to replace it with a relative path. Maybe I want to go through and say it's going to come through in a very particular, coming through in a very particular, from a very particular spot. Okay. And then if we have any other additional scripts that we want to run, in my case, I don't have any scripts that I want to run. But I'm going to run through all of this, just to very quickly run through all this. But I can actually say, again, all of these, I don't want to set up all this stuff over and over again. So I can save my configuration, or I can even load a configuration file. So in my case, I'm going to go to the project processor and load my own settings. And boom, here we go. So I loaded in all of those additional settings. Okay. And now if I hit I can actually go through and source perimeter not selected. You know what? I'm just going to remove that real quick. So I can actually say, let's start this, and it will actually run through everything. Oh, you know what? Projects. This guy. Add open projects and remove, or I'm just going to uncheck that one. So I'm going to do this only on my existing one, but I'm going to say, grab all this, and I want to hit start. So it's going to actually do a few things. So one of the items that it wanted to do was actually to remove views that were not on sheets. The view in the background that I have is actually my start view, that splash screen that I have. It's not on a sheet, and therefore it wanted to remove that. So I just said I want to keep it, keep this one view. So it's going to go through and kind of clean out my entire project. And one of the things it's going to do is clean out a lot of these empty stuff. So it's actually saving me. It's going to run a little bit faster after this is done, because it's actually going to go through and clean everything. Okay. While we wait a few moments here for this thing to just kind of go through the project and clean it out, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. I think we are running up to the hour, and I have a pair of tools left over that are very, very simple. They are the free tools that I'm going to leave you off with, and they're actually going to be the family exporter and the family importer. So I will just pretty quickly show you how that will work. Before I get there, let's chat a little bit about what that is actually going to do, because, or why it's even there. Because, well, I could go through and right-click on find a family within that project browser, right-click on it, and say, oh, I want to export or save this one family. But then I have to specify where I want to put that family, and then I've only ever done that one family. Revit also gives you the option to say, well, let's take everything and export everything, an entire library of every single family in my entire project, and just dump it into this folder. Again, it's either all or nothing. So there's no way for me to say, I just want to grab my doors, windows, and furniture. There's no way, or even just add casework on that. I just want to grab these ones. Oh, but there's these 3 families that I don't want. There's no way to say, specify what I want to grab and bring that in. And that's where the family exporter really comes in. I can run the tool. It will, I can run the tool, specify exactly which categories I want to work with, which families under those categories do I want to grab, take them and actually save them out into a very specific folder. So maybe I want to grab all my doors and put them into my personal library folder for all my doors. Grabbing very specific ones because I have a couple out of the box ones. I don't want to save those. Maybe I have a very custom ones that are specific to this project. Do I want to save those out of this project? Maybe not. But all of my standard ones, sure, maybe I'll grab all of those and put them into that very particular folder. So I'm saving a bunch of the stuff. In future webinars, we're going to be covering other processes, perhaps the family processor, which we can use to add other or modify that, modify those families that have been saved out and make some changes and kind of go through those little processes. Let's see if this is still working. But it's actually going to take the so the family processor can actually come in, makes changes to your families. Let's say I want to replace a bunch of shared parameters, or replace a bunch of family parameters with shared parameters, or a whole bunch of other things that it can do. But once all of those are done, I've either saved everything out, or I have a library full of my families. I could use the family loader and say, hey, I'm going to open up this project, or I'm going to open up another family. And I can say, let's open up the family loader, point to a bunch of other families, and hit go, and it will just take all of those and load them directly into your project, load them directly and nest them into your actual family. So using those processes brings up it's actually quite easy to kind of grab what you need and bring it into your project. Okay. Unfortunately, this tool is taking a little bit longer than I had hoped. So in that case, I would like to hopefully cancel this.
Peter, is that normal for this tool, or is that just about working from home?
I believe it's the file that I'm working on is deliberately full of a bunch of junk. So it's deliberately done that way so that when I do demonstrate something, I can find an error and show someone how to repair those errors. So because of all of that junk there, it's taking a little bit longer than expected. But there is a little point down here that says this could take several minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So depending on the size of your file will depend on how, depending on the size of the file, that depends on, how long it's going to take and how much junk you want to remove, how much you want to clean out and swap and work with that. Yeah. Oh, and I do want to point out that right now, this project processor does not work with project files on BIM 360, but that is something that we're actively working towards to make that actually work for, to make that actually work. Okay. Okay. So hopefully I can get this to, oh, Revit's going to crash on me. Nope. Okay, so in the meantime, does anyone have any questions at all regarding any of the tools that I talked about today?
No, but I don't see any questions right now, but Peter, I'll just let everybody know. The video or the recording will be sent to you. We also have a SolidCAD YouTube channel where you can get a lot of information about many of the CTC software and the webinars we've already completed. And if you have a desire to download the trial, please feel free to reach out to Peter or myself, and we will help you get set up with the BIM Manager Suite.
Absolutely. Also the BIM Batch Suite as well.
Sorry,
or
BIM
the
Batch
BIM Project
Suite.
Suite.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention before we go, that every single one of our tools is actually built up. So if you open it up, you'll notice that there's a couple different options at the very top up here. So a help button. This is just going to open up a big PDF and navigate you directly to the section, the section about this particular tool in that PDF. Also, if you don't like just reading through a bunch of dry documentation, you could even go into the videos and see it'll take you directly to a playlist of, or even just an individual video about someone explaining the exact tool that we're working with. And if you were running into errors and things aren't working right, there's also a button there for support, which will get you in contact with either myself or another one of our technical specialists to be able to actually run through these these objects and kind of get the answers that you need to be able to move forward. Yeah. Okay.
So Peter, do you think we have time to do the family tools?
I'm really hoping I can get this this tool to basically stop what it's doing and carry on. but as you can see, Revit is choosing to want to continue. So it will, I probably should have not clicked run on this. So it's actually doing a lot of stuff, but I don't believe we're going to have time to run through the family exporter and family importer. But I did take a moment to kind of talk about those, so that was good. But I don't believe we have time to actually run through them.
Okay. Well, then we'd like to thank everybody for attending. Please, if you'd like to learn more about some of the stuff we weren't able to touch on, we're available. Peter and I have figured out we're the only two people working on Friday, July 2nd here. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch shortly with a recording of the video of the meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you all.